March 17, 1945. Sergeant Karl Weiss of the Wehrmacht's 348th Volksgrenadier Division stood in the shattered remains of a farmhouse near Remagen, Germany, his hands trembling as he examined an object that should not exist. The weapon he held was an American M1 Carbine, common enough among captured equipment scattered across the collapsing Reich. But this particular carbine was different. Mounted atop its receiver sat a bizarre assembly, a bulky cylindrical scope with a large dish-shaped lamp attached to the barrel. Cables dangled from the weapon, leading to a heavy battery pack his men had discovered nearby. Weiss had fought on the Eastern Front. He had witnessed the Red Army's Katyusha rockets lighting the night sky, and had survived the grinding meat of Stalingrad. Yet nothing in his combat experience prepared him for what his unit's reconnaissance report would reveal about this strange American device. Within days, Wehrmacht intelligence would understand a devastating truth. While German scientists had pioneered infrared night vision technology years earlier, dismissing it as too experimental for mass production, the Americans had weaponized darkness itself, and German soldiers had been dying in the night without ever knowing why. If you're enjoying this deep dive into the story, hit the subscribe button and let us know in the comments from where in the world you are watching from today. The weapon system's development had begun in the summer of 1943, when the United States Army Corps of Engineers partnered with the Radio Corporation of America to adapt infrared image converter tubes, originally designed for industrial inspection, into military sites. The program moved with remarkable speed. By January 1944, working prototypes were undergoing brutal field testing at Fort Benning, Georgia, where they consistently allowed soldiers to detect and engage targets at ranges where unassisted troops remained effectively blind. The heart of the system was its active infrared spotlight, a powerful lamp mounted above or beside the carbine barrel that projected an invisible beam of infrared radiation. Human eyes could not detect this light. Soldiers moving through what they believed was protective darkness were actually illuminated perfectly clearly to anyone equipped with the appropriate viewer. The scope's image converter tube detected the reflected infrared energy and transformed it into a visible green image, allowing operators to track moving figures, identify targets, and engage with devastating accuracy. The complete assembly, designated officially as the United States Carbine Caliber .30 T3, consisted of the modified M1 Carbine platform, the T120 infrared scope, later standardized as the M1 Sniperscope, and a battery pack weighing nearly 30 pounds that powered both the spotlight and the image converter tube. The effective range was approximately 75 to 100 yards under optimal conditions, perfectly suited for defensive operations and close-range patrol work, where Japanese and German troops had previously held significant advantage through superior night-fighting training. Production began in late 1944, with contracts awarded to the Inland Division of General Motors and later Winchester. The weapons remained classified at the highest levels. Distribution was deliberately limited to select reconnaissance and security platoons, rarely more than a handful per division. Strict orders emphasized that under no circumstances should the equipment be allowed to fall into enemy hands intact. If capture appeared imminent, operators were instructed to destroy the delicate image converter tubes and disable the systems completely. The Pacific Theater received priority allocation. During the Battle of Okinawa in the spring of 1945, approximately 150 T3 carbine systems reached American Army and Marine units. The impact was immediate and psychologically devastating. Japanese defenders who had relied on nocturnal infiltration tactics for years suddenly found themselves cut down by accurate fire in conditions where visibility should have been zero. After-action reports documented that roughly 30% of all Japanese casualties from small arms fire during the first week of Okinawan operations came from soldiers equipped with infrared carbines. The psychological effect proved nearly as valuable as the physical casualties. Japanese troops began to report that American forces possessed supernatural powers, or demon eyes, allowing impossible night vision. Some speculated Americans had developed techniques to amplify moonlight or possessed radar-like detection capabilities. The truth that they were being illuminated by invisible radiation remained completely unknown to Japanese intelligence throughout the war. In Europe, deployment came later and in smaller numbers. The first infrared carbine systems arrived in France in late September 1944, issued to reconnaissance elements of the 2nd Armoured Division operating along the Siegfried Line. During October, when German forces conducted aggressive night infiltration operations against American positions near Aachen, soldiers equipped with T3 carbines transformed these engagements entirely. German infantry approaching under cover of darkness walked into perfectly coordinated ambushes, tracked every step by operators who watched their movement through eerie green scopes. German after-action reports captured and translated by Allied intelligence reflected profound confusion. Survivors attributed the impossible American accuracy to new sound detection technology or invisible aerial flares. Some German officers suspected Americans had deployed specialized radar units to detect infantry movement. None guessed that portable infrared weapon sights existed in practical form, operating on principles German scientists had explored, but military command had dismissed as too experimental for field use. This failure stemmed from Germany's own infrared research history. As early as 1935, German firms like AEG and Leitz had developed functioning night vision prototypes, but with the Reich's industrial capacity strained by 1944, resources flowed toward jet fighters, advanced tanks, and V-weapons. Night vision remained a lower priority. The German program that did emerge, designated Gelgerät 1229 and code-named Vampir, came far too late. This infrared sight, designed to mount on the Saint-Guy 44 assault rifle, entered limited production only in late 1944. The system consisted of a scope and infrared spotlight weighing about 5 pounds, plus a wooden-cased battery for the light weighing 30 pounds, and a second battery in a modified gas mask container to power the image converter. The complete package is strapped to a Tragergestel 39 pack frame. Soldiers designated to use it were called Nachtjäger, night hunters. Between 200 and 300 and 10 Vampir units were manufactured by the war's end. Most were delivered to Wehrmacht units in early 1945, primarily allocated to the Eastern Front, where Soviet night operations posed the greatest threat. The system's combat employment remained extremely limited. A few Waffen-SS troops reportedly used the devices during defensive operations in Hungary and later in the final battles around Berlin. Isolated reports from Soviet troops mentioned German soldiers with peculiar non-shining torches coupled with enormous optical sights, though these accounts were never verified or systematically documented. The critical difference between German and American programs was not technological capability, but operational commitment. Germany had the theoretical knowledge and engineering expertise to develop infrared weapon sights comparable to American systems. What Germany lacked was the industrial capacity, resource allocation, and most importantly, the strategic vision to pursue the technology while it could still influence outcomes. By the time Vampir systems reached frontline units, the Reich's collapse was weeks away. Wehrmacht intelligence remained entirely unaware that American soldiers were already employing practical infrared carbines in combat throughout late 1944 and early 1945. German troops continued treating darkness as a protective shield, confident that night operations provided tactical advantage through stealth and training. They infiltrated lines, staged ambushes, and repositioned forces under cover of night, never suspecting that in certain sectors American defenders could see them as clearly as daylight. The revelation, when it finally came, arrived not through systematic intelligence gathering, but through the chaos of Germany's final collapse. As Wehrmacht units retreated across the Rhine in March 1945, American forces advanced rapidly, overrunning German positions before defenders could execute proper withdrawal. Equipment was abandoned, documents left behind, and weapons captured intact. On or around March 17th, elements of the 348th Volksgrenadier Division, operating near Remagen, discovered an abandoned American position. Among the equipment left behind was a complete T3 Carbine system with infrared scope, battery pack, and operational manual. The discovery reached Wehrmacht technical intelligence within days. The analysts who examined the captured equipment experienced a moment of profound recognition. This was not some exotic experimental prototype. The manufacturing quality, standardized components, and detailed operational documentation indicated mass production and widespread deployment. The Americans had solved the fragile image converter tube problem. They had miniaturized power supplies. They had created a rugged field weapon that ordinary infantrymen could operate effectively under combat conditions. Most devastatingly, the serial numbers and production markings revealed the system had been in manufacture since late 1944. American soldiers had been using these weapons for months, possibly longer. Every German night operation conducted near American lines during that period had potentially been observed, tracked, and targeted by an enemy possessing complete visual superiority. A technical report prepared by Wehrmacht engineers sometime in late March 1945 survived the war in captured German archives. The document's tone reflected barely concealed dismay. The American infrared carbine used principles identical to those German researchers had developed years earlier. The basic science was not novel. What distinguished the American implementation was industrial execution and military integration. While Germany had produced a few hundred experimental units in the war's final months, the Americans had fielded working systems 18 months earlier, refined them through combat testing, and integrated them into standard infantry tactics. The report concluded with an observation that must have been particularly bitter for German technical staff. The Americans had achieved what German engineers had proposed repeatedly, transforming infrared night vision from laboratory curiosity to battlefield weapon. The difference was not German scientific inferiority. The difference was American industrial commitment, resource allocation, and most critically, the operational foresight to pursue the technology while it could still provide decisive advantage. For Wehrmacht commanders reading these reports in late March and early April 1945, the revelation came far too late to influence tactical decisions. The Rhine had been crossed. American and British forces were driving deep into Germany from the west while Soviet armies advanced from the east. The war's outcome was no longer in doubt, yet the captured infrared carbine represented something more troubling than a missed technological opportunity. It symbolized a fundamental strategic failure. Throughout the war, German military planning had emphasized tactical excellence, operational audacity, and technological innovation in select areas like jet fighters and advanced armor. But the infrared carbine demonstrated American superiority in systematic development and mass production of practical combat systems. While Germany poured resources into prestigious projects like the V-2 rocket and Tiger tanks, the Americans had quietly revolutionized night combat with a system so effective that enemy forces never realized what killed them. The psychological impact on German troops who learned of the infrared carbine's existence cannot be precisely measured, but contemporary documents hint at the effect. Soldiers who had conducted night operations near American lines began to understand that their movements may have been perfectly visible to an enemy they believed was blind. Every infiltration, every nocturnal repositioning, every supposedly stealthy approach had potentially exposed them to observation and fire from opponents possessing technological superiority, so complete it seemed supernatural. If you find this story engaging, please take a moment to subscribe and enable notifications. It helps us continue producing in-depth content like this. Some German units attempted to develop countermeasures based on the technical intelligence gathered from captured T3 carbines. Recognizing that the infrared spotlight required direct line of sight to illuminate targets, tactical guidance recommended using terrain features for cover and approaching American positions through indirect routes. Others proposed detecting infrared spotlights using captured infrared-sensitive photographic film, hoping to identify which American soldiers carried the special equipment. These efforts achieved marginal success at best, and required resources and coordination. German forces increasingly lacked in the war's final weeks. The broader lesson that technological innovation could render traditional military virtues obsolete resonated through Japanese military leadership surviving the war. Post-war analysis emphasized that spiritual training and tactical skill, while valuable, could not compensate for decisive technological disadvantage. The infrared carbine became a symbol, American pragmatism and industrial might overcoming warrior spirit through methodical application of scientific principles to military problems. The circumstances surrounding German discovery of American infrared carbines varied across the collapsing front. While the Remagen capture stands as the most documented instance, other units encountered the technology through different means. During the final battles in the Ruhr Pocket in April 1945, elements of the German 11th Panzer Division reportedly discovered abandoned American defensive positions containing infrared equipment. Wehrmacht intelligence teams, still functioning despite the Reich's disintegration, collected these finds and attempted systematic analysis. One particularly revealing document, a technical evaluation dated April 3, 1945, survived in archives captured by Allied forces. The report's author, identified only as Hauptmann, Captain K. Müller of Wehrmacht Technical Intelligence, provided detailed analysis of a captured T3 carbine system. Müller noted that the American device used image converter tube technology fundamentally identical to German research, dating back to the mid-1930s. The infrared spotlight projecting invisible illumination, the photocathode detecting reflected radiation, the electron amplification creating visible images. All these principles had been understood by German scientists years earlier. What astonished Müller was the implementation. The American system showed clear evidence of mass production techniques with standardized components that ordinary soldiers could maintain in the field. Müller's report included estimates based on serial numbers and production markings. He concluded that the Americans had likely manufactured at least 2,000 complete infrared carbine systems by early 1945, with production continuing. Distribution appeared focused on specialized reconnaissance and security units rather than general infantry, but even limited deployment represented a capability German forces completely lacked. The report's final section posed a question that must have been particularly painful for Wehrmacht technical staff. If German scientists understood the principles, if German industry possessed the capability, why had the Reich failed to pursue this technology when it could have provided a decisive advantage? The American approach differed fundamentally. Rather than pursuing revolutionary breakthroughs, American planners systematically identified tactical problems and developed practical solutions at scale. Where Germans created sophisticated weapons in limited numbers, Americans mass-produced adequate systems by the thousands. The infrared carbine exemplified this philosophy perfectly. The T3 system represented no revolutionary scientific breakthrough. German, British, and American scientists all understood image intensification principles by the early 1940s. What distinguished American implementation was commitment to practical application. Extensive testing identified weaknesses. Engineering refinement addressed those problems. Manufacturing processes enabled production at a useful scale. Distribution systems delivered weapons to troops who could employ them effectively. German soldiers who learned of infrared carbines in the war's final weeks understood they had faced enemies, possessing technological superiority so complete it approached magic. American troops had literally seen through darkness, tracking German movements invisible to unassisted eyes, targeting soldiers confident in their concealment. Every nocturnal infiltration, every nighttime repositioning, every supposedly stealthy approach had potentially exposed German forces to observation and fire from opponents wielding what seemed like supernatural powers. The psychological impact extended beyond individual soldiers to broader Wehrmacht morale. Throughout the war, German forces had taken pride in their technological sophistication. The Panther tank, the MG-42 machine gun, the Sate G-44 assault rifle, all represented cutting-edge weapons superior to Allied equivalents. German soldiers believed that even when outnumbered, their equipment and training provided qualitative advantage. The infrared carbine shattered that confidence. Here was American technology not just adequate but decisively superior, deployed at scale while German equivalents remained experimental prototypes. Most devastatingly, American troops using infrared carbines had killed thousands of enemy soldiers. Japanese in the Pacific, Germans in Europe, who never understood why their concealment failed. The technology had proven its battlefield value decisively. Meanwhile, German vampire systems saw such limited employment that even post-war analysis struggled to document their combat effectiveness. A few isolated reports from the Eastern Front, scattered accounts from the final battles around Berlin, nothing approaching systematic operational evaluation. The consequences of these differing philosophies shaped the war's outcome. While German scientists experimented with infrared optics in laboratories, American soldiers used infrared carbines to eliminate enemy infiltrators in Okinawa. While German engineers perfected vampire prototypes, American reconnaissance troops tracked German night movements along the Rhine with earlier generation but operationally deployed sniperscopes. While German high command debated resource allocation, American industry had already solved the production challenges and fielded working systems. For Wehrmacht officers analyzing captured American equipment in April 1945, these lessons came far too late. The Rhine had been crossed, the Ruhr surrounded, Berlin threatened from multiple directions. No technological revelation, however significant, could alter outcomes. Yet the infrared carbine represented something more troubling than a missed tactical opportunity. It symbolized a fundamental failure of strategic vision, the inability to recognize which technologies mattered and to commit resources accordingly while time remained. German military culture valued spectacular innovations like blitzkrieg and jet fighters. But this focus created blind spots regarding unglamorous but effective technologies like the infrared carbine, which worked well enough to provide Americans decisive advantage. The infrared carbine's legacy extended far beyond World War II. During the Korean War, improved American night vision systems again provided significant advantages. M2 and M3 sniperscopes, refined versions of the original T3 technology, saw widespread use against North Korean and Chinese forces who lacked equivalent capabilities. American troops could detect enemy movement, direct artillery fire, and coordinate defensive operations with effectiveness impossible for opponents limited to traditional methods. By the Vietnam War, passive night vision devices, the Starlight scope, represented second-generation technology no longer requiring active infrared illumination. These systems amplified ambient light, moonlight, starlight, atmospheric glow, allowing soldiers to see in near-total darkness without revealing their positions through detectable infrared beams. Viet Cong and North Vietnamese forces, despite their legendary expertise in jungle warfare and nocturnal operations, found themselves increasingly vulnerable to American troops possessing technological vision superiority. Modern military forces take night vision technology for granted. Helmet-mounted night vision goggles are standard equipment. Weapon-mounted infrared lasers provide targeting capability invisible to enemies lacking appropriate viewers. Thermal imaging detects heat signatures through darkness, smoke, and foliage. Unmanned aerial vehicles equipped with sophisticated infrared sensors conduct 24-hour surveillance. The contemporary battlefield operates continuously, day and night alike, with darkness providing no meaningful concealment against technologically sophisticated opponents. This transformation traces directly to pioneering work during World War II. The T3 Carbine and its infrared sniperscope represented humanity's first practical attempt to pierce the ancient barrier of darkness through electronic means. While primitive by modern standards, these early systems demonstrated that technology could fundamentally alter the relationship between combatants and their environment. Night no longer guaranteed concealment, darkness no longer equalized opposing forces. Vision could extend beyond natural human limitations through artificial amplification. For German soldiers who encountered American infrared carbines in March and April 1945, this revelation came as a profound shock. Men who had fought from France to the Volga, who had experienced every variety of Allied weaponry from artillery barrages to tactical airstrikes, suddenly faced an enemy capability completely outside their experience. Americans could see them in pitch darkness, perfect visibility when German troops possessed none. The psychological impact proved nearly as devastating as the physical casualties. Captured German soldiers, interviewed by American intelligence teams in the war's final weeks, expressed consistent disbelief when informed about infrared technology. Several insisted their interrogators were lying, that no such capability existed, that they had simply been unlucky or outnumbered during night engagements. Others speculated about radar, about sound detection, about anything except the truth that Americans possessed practical electronic night vision, while German equivalents remained experimental. This gap between perception and reality highlighted a broader intelligence failure. Throughout the war's final year, Wehrmacht intelligence collected extensive information about Allied capabilities through reconnaissance, signal intercepts, prisoner interrogations, and captured documents. Yet no systematic reporting indicated American deployment of infantry portable infrared weapon sights. Either American operational security proved remarkably effective, or German intelligence simply failed to recognize the significance of scattered reports and fragmentary evidence. The truth likely involved both factors. American commanders treated infrared carbines as highly classified equipment, restricting knowledge to select units and emphasizing security procedures to prevent capture. Strict orders required destroying the delicate image converter tubes if enemy contact seemed imminent. Soldiers using the systems received explicit instructions never to discuss them with personnel lacking appropriate clearance. This discipline proved remarkably effective, preventing leaks that might have alerted German intelligence. Simultaneously, German intelligence focused primarily on conventional threats. Analysts tracked Allied armor concentrations, artillery deployments, air force dispositions, seeking indicators of major offensives. Scattered reports of unusual American optical equipment, if they reached higher headquarters at all, likely seemed insignificant compared to immediate operational concerns. By the time captured infrared carbines provided undeniable evidence, the Reich's collapse was measured in weeks. The irony remained profound. Germany had pioneered military infrared research. German scientists understood image intensification principles. German engineers had developed functioning prototypes. Yet Germany never realized Americans had transformed laboratory curiosities into battlefield weapons until those weapons had already contributed to thousands of German casualties. The failure lay not in scientific capability, but in strategic vision. The inability to recognize which technologies deserved priority and to commit resources accordingly. This lesson shaped post-war military thinking throughout the West. Technological superiority required not just scientific research, but also industrial capacity, resource allocation, operational integration, and timely deployment. Revolutionary designs meant nothing if they never reached frontline troops in meaningful numbers. Practical systems deployed at scale proved more valuable than sophisticated prototypes languishing in laboratories. The unglamorous work of engineering refinement, production optimization, and logistics planning ultimately determined which innovations influenced battlefield outcomes. For historians studying World War II's technological dimension, the infrared carbine story offers particularly rich insight. It demonstrates how innovation occurred not through isolated genius, but through systematic programs connecting research, development, testing, production, and deployment. It reveals how different military cultures approached technology, German emphasis on excellence versus American focus on adequate solutions at scale. It shows that technological advantage stemmed as much from industrial mobilization and strategic foresight as from scientific brilliance. The captured German soldiers who first examined American infrared carbines in March 1945 could not have grasped these broader implications. They saw only the immediate, devastating truth: Americans possessed working night vision. German equivalents remained dreams. The technological gap they had assumed favored Germany actually tilted decisively toward the Allies in this critical area. Their confidence in German engineering superiority had been founded on illusion. As the Reich collapsed around them in April and early May 1945, Wehrmacht soldiers who learned about infrared carbines understood they had fought enemies possessing advantages beyond their comprehension. Darkness, that ancient shield and equalizer, had betrayed them. American troops had seen through the night, tracking German movements, targeting German soldiers, dominating nocturnal battlefields where Germans expected protection. The psychological impact of that realization, coming at the war's bitter end, added to the sense of overwhelming defeat. The infrared carbine systems themselves, both American and German, became museum pieces after the war. Original T3 carbines are now rare artifacts, preserved in military collections at places like the United States Army Ordnance Museum. They stand as reminders of a time when battlefield innovation leaped ahead in secrecy, altering combat's fundamental nature before most combatants realized what was possible. For the soldiers who carried them, they were cumbersome and fragile, yet life-saving. For their enemies, they were unknowable instruments, creating terror in the dark. For military historians, they marked the beginning of the age when technology, not daylight, determined who could see and who could survive. The German vampire systems, even rarer due to their limited production, occupy similar places in European military museums. They represent roads not taken, technologies understood but never adequately pursued, capabilities that might have mattered if developed earlier and deployed at scale. They stand as silent testimony to choices made when resources were scarce and priorities uncertain. Choices that seemed reasonable at the time but proved tragically inadequate when measured against what opponents achieved. The story of Germans capturing American infrared carbines and realizing GIs could kill at night thus becomes more than a tale of tactical surprise. It represents a broader narrative about innovation, industrial capacity, strategic vision, and how military cultures approached technological challenges. It demonstrates that scientific knowledge alone guarantees nothing without the commitment to translate that knowledge into practical systems and deploy them where they matter most. For the Wehrmacht soldier examining an American infrared carbine in those final weeks of war, the weapon represented the future made present. Electronic optics piercing darkness, technology overcoming natural limitations. Industrial civilization, applying scientific principles to extend human capability beyond evolved biology. That future had arrived not in German hands, despite their early research and engineering excellence, but in American hands through systematic development and mass production. The lesson proved both immediate and timeless. Immediate because it explained countless mysterious deaths, German soldiers killed by enemies they never saw, infiltrations detected impossibly early, defensive positions that seemed supernaturally aware. Timeless because it revealed a fundamental truth about warfare's evolution. Technology would increasingly determine outcomes. Industrial capacity to produce advanced systems at scale would matter as much as design brilliance. Speed of development and deployment would outweigh theoretical sophistication. The future would belong not necessarily to the most innovative, but to those who could transform innovation into operational capability most quickly and completely. As World War II drew to its close in May 1945, German soldiers who had encountered American infrared carbines carried this knowledge into defeat. The weapon that allowed GIs to kill at night symbolized not just tactical disadvantage, but comprehensive strategic failure. Germany had lost not only the war, but also the technological race that might have influenced its outcome. American pragmatism, industrial might, and systematic approach to military problems had triumphed over German tactical excellence and engineering sophistication. That triumph shaped the peace that followed. The Cold War's technological competition emphasized not just innovation, but also production capacity, deployment speed, and operational integration. Night vision technology continued evolving through successive generations, each improvement built on foundations laid during World War II. The infrared carbine's descendants, modern night vision goggles and thermal imaging systems, became standard equipment for armed forces worldwide, transforming how humans interact with darkness in conflict. For those German soldiers who first understood what American infrared carbines represented, standing among the ruins of the Reich in April 1945, the revelation must have carried special bitterness. They had fought believing German technology provided qualitative advantage even when quantitatively overwhelmed. The infrared carbine proved that assumption catastrophically wrong. Americans possessed not just more weapons but better weapons in critical areas, weapons their own scientists had understood, but their own system had failed to prioritize and produce. That failure, multiplied across numerous technologies and compounded over years of war, helped explain how the 1,000-year Reich collapsed in 12. Industrial capacity mattered, strategic foresight mattered, systematic development mattered. Speed of deployment mattered. All these factors, which Americans had mastered and Germans had undervalued, ultimately determined which innovations influenced history and which remained laboratory curiosities. The infrared carbine, that ungainly weapon with its bulky scope and heavy battery pack, thus earned its place in military history not through revolutionary design, but through operational impact. It worked. It reached frontline troops. It killed enemies who never understood what happened. And when German soldiers finally discovered its existence, far too late to respond, they understood they had faced opponents whose technological sophistication exceeded German capabilities in ways they had never imagined possible. Thank you for reading. For more detailed historical breakdowns, check out the other videos on your screen now and don't forget to subscribe.